what's going on with this.
We're live, and then I'm waiting to go live over on Instagram, and then I'm going to introduce you to everyone. Dee, dee, dee.
Okay.
And we're live on Instagram now. How cool is that?
Hello.
Charna Cassell is a badass trauma therapist, and I wanted to bring you on because trauma and the stuff going on in our bodies and our nervous systems really gets in the way of connection. So I'm hoping to learn so much about you and transfer that knowledge to all of our listeners on the sidewalk, and to toot your horn because you're amazing and I adore you because you are.
It's mutual.
But can you locate us in the world and kind of give us your lineage and training and what you do in your words and your voice so that folks can hear you?
Absolutely. So I came to doing my own healing as well as training and working with trauma initially through the Traci Institute and embodied somatic work, embodied leadership and somatic work, doing physical practices and body work, and then through generative somatics with Stacey Haynes, used to also be with Denise Benson. And then I went to CIIS, no trauma training there, but I got licensed as a psychotherapist in the integral counseling program. And yeah, that's my.
I'm going to keep it simple. Some people don't know what somatics is.
Okay. Yeah. So somatics, soma is the living body in its wholeness, the mind, body, spirit, emotional connection between all of those things. So, how often like kids will feel, they'll get belly aches instead of being able to say, I'm scared or sad. Right. So things land in our physical body. When someone talks about somatizing or a psychosomatic illness, it means that there's an emotional component. And I actually believe that all things, when they're not processed on a spiritual or emotional level, they land in the physical body because they want our attention. They're actually messengers. They're saying, hey, listen to this. And it's very heavy-handed usually, right? So in the form of pain that we have, like we're not speaking something and we'll kind of get a sore throat or, I remember once going through a breakup and having my neck completely locked up. I couldn't turn my head. And I don't remember the exact language the chiropractor used, but he was describing that what my ligaments and muscles were doing was exactly a metaphor for what was happening emotionally for me, like holding on and not able to let go or something,
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, so I'm curious what brought you to this work because talk therapy is different than somatic therapy. I mean, there's talking involved in somatic therapy, but bring people in because the folks in this crew are not all therapists. So this is going to be new for them and help them understand what's different about what you do than someone that you just go talk to about your problems.
Sure. So, trauma for me started in utero. My mom was a heroin addict, and then I was born 3 months early, or 2.5 months early. And then life kept going in a similar trajectory. So there was physical, emotional, sexual abuse, and neglect and sexual trauma. And I started talk therapy at 14. And talk therapy, I was a very insightful kid even before talk therapy. But talk therapy creates a lot of awareness and insight, but it didn't change anything that was happening with my nervous system. So it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s when I found a book called The Survivor's Guide to Sex, which was renamed Healing Sex, written by Stacey Haynes. And I started in a group with her and then started training at the Traci Institute because I wanted to keep working with her, and she'd left her private practice. So I worked with her individually and in a group, and I got introduced to these weird physical practices that I didn't understand, that all I knew is we would do something like saying, stop or no, and I would start crying and feel terrified. Mm-hmm. And so what these physical practices did, and I want to be clear that not all somatic work looks the same. Right? There's somatic psychology, and some of that is just teaching mindfulness about the connections. The lineage I come from is about putting your body into physical practice. And Stacey specifically is more focused around social justice and trauma, like her work when she branched off away from the Traci Institute for a period, and then they remerged together. So physical practices, and 𝗟𝗏𝗰𝗁𝗂𝗃 uses Aikido-based practices to help train embodied leaders. And Stacy then used a lot of those practices and and created other practices around embodied boundaries and being able to stand for yourself and being able to move towards things, whether it's personal or political, that you care deeply about, like take a stand for things. So doing these physical practices, just the same way that you would learn a dance routine or how to play guitar, that through muscle memory, through repetition, by practicing something repeatedly, you create new neural pathways, right? So rewiring your brain and your beliefs through your body. So an example would be, I'm doing, let's say it's a boundary exercise with somebody, right? And having them walk towards me, or I'm walking towards them. So initially, let's say I'm walking towards them, and I say, go ahead, tell me to stop when I get close enough that you know that there's something in your body that tells you stop. And I remember doing this with a client's dad, and I got all the way in. So I'm walking in with my hand extended out in front of me like this, and my hand, I'm going to make contact with his chest. So these exercises, they're just stressful enough to bring your belief systems or your habits to the surface. And so you'll react faster than you're not consciously thinking, I'm going to do this thing, but your body responds in its habit. So this particular man didn't stop me. He never said, I got all the way in, and he was like,
wow, frozen.
And he was like, stop, no, but he didn't register. And so I slowly took a step back, another step back, and watched this slowly, like his shoulders dropping, his belly unclenching, his breath, settling and getting fuller. And I was quite far away, and he could see like, oh, my body does respond, but I just accommodate. So he learned what boundaries were that day. He didn't even understand what a boundary was, right? So through, and then as we would do that repeatedly, he could start to see like, oh, this is actually, you take 4 steps, and that's where my boundary lives. This is my comfort zone. And I noticed that in life, I just really constrict everything in order to not hurt someone's feelings or have them feel rejected, but doesn't, what about what's happening over here, right?
I know nothing about this behavior at all.
Yeah. And so the idea is that through repetition, it gets easier. Right? So the first time it could be terrifying for someone to say no, because, saying no was not, it was either taken away because of trauma, or it wasn't permitted in their family. Like having needs was not okay. And that shows up on a cultural level as well, and on a social level as well. I've done practices with people that are walking in towards me, and, it could be a tall Black woman. And because she doesn't want to be seen as an angry or threatening Black woman, she kind of slouches down and goes into an appeasing stance. And that's what the habit is. And it's just unconscious and automatic, or it is very conscious and it's still automatic, right? What happens is by slowing down, regrounding each time. I think of it as if you've ever gone on a hike and there's a main trail, and then there's you can see offshoots, and you're like, oh, there must be a deer that created that trail. It's like you have to stomp the grass down enough times to create an additional path to and from something, right? So that's what we're doing. We're stomping down the grass. We're creating a new pathway, a neural pathway in the brain that is a different option to appeasing, to freezing, to pulling away. It's like, oh, I can actually access my voice and say no sooner. Right?
Amazing.
So yeah, through that work, before I started doing those physical practices, I did not have embodied boundaries. I would freeze. Things would happen to me. I felt like I had a sign on my forehead that said like, assault me, or, be inappropriate. And my body learned how to step out of the way. And I unfroze. Like we have fight, flight, freeze, submit, attach, dissociate. We have these responses to stressful situations, and they can be layered. So often if people have a freeze response, a fight can live underneath it. And I got to learn how to access my fight once I could thaw out the freeze, and doing physical practices. And it doesn't have to be something like this. It could be for you, martial arts. It could be spinning poi. It could be dance. It could be walking 50 miles a day, like some kind of physical practice. Sometimes people who are athletes, it can definitely be a dissociative, like they're a disembodied physical fitness. And other times it can be an embodiment practice that helps you re-embody yourself after trauma.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm such a fan of this. I need to go back in for another dose. I'm ready. I'm like, oh, there's some more things I'm doing but yeah, I didn't get any real good work done in therapy until I worked with a somatic therapist for 8 years. I'm like, oh, wow. Huh. Look at that. There's a whole world going on in this body here.
Yeah. Well, and how are you measuring good work? Like, what does that mean to you when you say that?
That my life improved in marked ways. That I felt like I could, it's the basics. I could sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't feel like I'm perpetually holding in my sacrum and the base of my skull. And so I'd have all these back problems. Those went away. Tension in the jaw. There's still stuff, but I track it more now.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's always stuff. And I got to work with Stacy at CIS, but not like you got to at the Strozi Institute. And some of those boundaries practices are just badass, but all this body stuff is.
Yeah.
What are some, no, go ahead.
I was just going to tell you a story so I worked with her individual weekly, and then I was also in a group, and it was a survivors group. And there was this one practice that, the person would walk towards you and you'd say, stop, and you'd put your arms out. And I was like, this is so silly, because she didn't give a lot of context. I think because I'm a therapist, I like to, I do a little more explaining with my clients than Stacy did. And maybe I was the newest participant in the group, but there was very little explanation as to why we were doing this silly stuff that I could make sense of. And then I was in the Castro, and I was with a group of friends, and it was Halloween, and this drunk man came up to us, and he's like, and he's like kind of pushing in on us. And my friend who was in the group with me was there, and I feel very protective of people. And so I just automatically did the arm thing. And I was like, you're in our space. You need to go away. And it was like, I had access to that in a way that I had not previously had access. And my friend was like, you did that silly arm thing. Like, you did that thing. And I kid you not, I have had multiple experiences of men almost assaulting me on the street, like homeless people that are not in their right mind. I don't think they're intending necessarily to, like, blocking me in some kind of way. And I just automatically do this. And I say, no, just that's it. But what it's doing is, on an energetic level, I'm claiming that space around me. And they've literally turned and walked away. So it's goofy. And some people feel very self-conscious when we're doing these practices, and other people immediately, there's a huge emotional release in getting to do it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you're creating this implicit somatic memory where your body just remembered without you having to do any kind of intellectual thought process. You just knew.
Well, it's through the repeated, 6 repetitions, I'm told. I have this meditative light machine that I use, created by a neurologist and a psychologist in Austria. And it entrains the brain into more alpha and theta brainwave states. And what they say is, like, 6 uses of this light can create a permanent new neural pathway. Wow. It's why meditating repeatedly, it's like anything that you repeatedly do things do fade if you don't use them,
Yeah.
right? But it's fascinating. Yeah, it's stuck. I did enough repetitions that it's stuck.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious how this. I had a conflict with a friend this week. I wasn't going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And there was a power differential between us because of our identities. And, I think I was able to stay regulated enough to set a boundary and be clear. But I think that when there's a power over, power under dynamic, it can still be hard to regulate the nervous system. And I feel like there's so much of what Stacy at least embodies and what I know you embody, which is how can we work with power differently so that when we are meeting each other in these context spaces, we're not reacting, but we're effective. And so I guess I wanted to add power to the mix. And how is power relevant? Like when someone's got more power than you, can you just walk me through that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing. Like for me, it goes without question. I'm always thinking about power and power dynamics. I remember being in a class at CIS and the couples therapist, I brought that up and he was like, talking about doing couples therapy and there being two men and a woman. And he was like, I don't know, power, and I was like, what? It obviously depends on the context in terms of how I would approach working with it. Do you want to share any more about your specific situation, or do you want me to just speak generally about if I'm doing couples therapy with or working with somebody?
Do that.
I acknowledge, like, if I have a client who has had a neglectful or abusive mother, like women in power, there is going to be a dynamic there. I think it's really important to acknowledge when I have a client who's a man of color and I'm a white woman, like acknowledging the obvious, right? Acknowledging where I can meet him and get him and acknowledging where I might miss things. And there's all sorts of subtle ways. Sometimes people, depending on what they've grown up with, and if there was abuse of power, you can see that in a lack of eye contact. And someone might think of that as a lack of confidence, but that could also be, it's a strategy to be safe. It could be helping that person dissociate and not feel their overwhelm.
Yeah.
Right? So me even making eye contact or my proximity, how much I'm leaning in, all of these things can impact and like attuning. When you're whether you're in a professional setting or in a personal setting, attuning is paying attention to someone's breath, how they're breathing. Are they leaning away from you or towards you? Is there, in their micro expressions, where is their tension? Like, are their shoulders up? Like, what are you intuiting? I mean, often people will just talk over. If they're upset with somebody, they'll just keep talking and hope, like, if I drill you, you'll get it. It'll get in. Some of the bullets will get in, and they're not looking and seeing, is this person in a regulated enough space to actually take in what's being said? Right. And I think a lot of times people are in desperation. They're not trying to cause harm, but they're like, if I talk louder and faster and, maybe you'll get me. They want to be seen and gotten. Right.
Yeah. Well, and we're in a world right now where conflict, sort of dysregulated conflict, because conflict is, you and I see couples, so we believe conflict is healthy, but I don't think dysregulated conflict is very effective.
Yeah.
And so, but it's so hard, especially one of the things I said to this pal of mine, I said, look, you're a guy, I'm a gal. Gals get different messages about what we're allowed to do with our anger, and I'm still working on it. I still got a lot of strategies here that have me want to be nice to you when I'm actually really pissed off at you. And so I know I was a little clunky at that, but I need you to give me some grace, because I was told that if I'm direct and angry with you, that's not okay, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to make everything about identity politics and say, well, just because I'm the marginalized person in this duo, that I'm allowed to sort of be See, I think that's the thing. I'm sort of wanting to learn from you. What
Yeah.
is the difference between reactive conflict or dysregulated conflict and conflict that's grounded and effective and gets us somewhere?
Well, and that was the piece. It's like, can you attune, or how attuned is the other person, right? So in an ideal world, when one person is triggered and they're out of what we can call, what's typically called the window of tolerance, I like to call it the window of capacity to be with, right? So this is how much sensation and emotion can you be with before you get so overwhelmed you're put into a regressed, like a younger, traumatized, wounded state. And you're suddenly, instead of being a 40 something year old, you're 6 years old, you're 12 years old, you feel unsafe, you feel angry, you feel scared, and this is the challenge, right? Is that most people are not trained to notice the signs when someone is no longer in present time, right? When someone's reaction is disproportionate to the present moment, that's one sign. But like, in an ideal situation, when one person is feeling is reacting and having really big emotions, the other person can have compassion for where they're coming from, rather than get defensive and reacting back. Right. Not easy on a one-on-one situation, and we're looking at it on like in terms of war or genocide. We're looking at it on a cultural level. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, of course, it doesn't work in any situation. Right. Yeah. And it's hard to have enough grounding inside yourself. You need to have done enough of your own work to be self-regulated before you can co-regulate, which is offer the support and go like, oh, I see what's happening for that person.
Rather than taking it personally and attacking back, which
yes,
is often what's in vogue right now.
Going into a fight response, right? Being generous with and not assuming the worst of the other person, right? And let's be very clear that no matter how much training you have in working with trauma and your nervous system, it doesn't mean you are not human and you don't have moments where your trauma grips you and takes over. And you're frozen, you're scared, you're impatient, you're, whatever. It may last, it lasts for a shorter amount of time with more practice, right? But it doesn't mean that you're never gonna, if you train in this stuff, you just are less reactive and you come back more quickly. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
I don't know if this comes up for you, but this piece that you were just describing, where you can have grace for somebody who is dysregulated rather than you yourself getting dysregulated, is something that happens with couples all the time. And usually I'll have one partner say, my partner should just learn to speak exactly the right way and never get dysregulated so that I don't then respond mean. If they're mean first, then I get to be mean back. I'm like, oh, wish it worked that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get upset and we need our partner's help at calming us down. And sometimes you need to get better at expressing your upset more skillfully, but sometimes they really need to borrow your nervous system to sort of regroup. But I'm just curious how you work with that, because there is a little bit of this tone policing. Let's learn to communicate in a really pristine way so that you don't ruffle anyone's feathers. And I'm just like, oh, I think it's a little bit of both. Yes, we need to be better communicators. That is true. You don't get to, just be a mean-spirited person. But at the same time, take that up, Charna. Teach me.
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what I can teach you. I think you're pretty skillful. I think you said it. I think it's a both and. I mean, I was working with a client today, and it's basically this issue, which is, okay, so this is a situation where you need to ground and regulate yourself more. It's about your lack of internal safety. And you need to talk to that young part of yourself, right? Like you need to be, so there are times when we get co-regulated, we get support from the outside by an attuned partner or therapist or whoever. And there are other times where we need to be that good mother, father figure for ourselves and say, hey, I know you're triggered. I know you're scared. And you don't feel safe and you think that this thing is going to happen. What he actually said is not harmful, right? So doing your own internal reality check, right?
Yeah.
You know, I had a couple that I worked with a really long time ago where there was anytime there was an impulse to even be tender with their partner, if it would, like, the sensation would rise up in them and they would hit them. And so it was like, it could be affection and love, but it was like, it was so much sensation. The impulse was to hit the person, right? And so in this situation, it's like, this person that you love's existence is in feeling sensation in this body over here is the trigger. Is this person supposed to stop existing? I know this is a hyperbolic extreme example,
but it's helpful. It's really
helpful. But this person over here needs to learn, oh, I'm starting to feel this rise of sensation. And I can explain how I worked with that. And then I need to slow it down and track it. What are all the signs? First, it's with my pelvic floor, then it's with my belly, then it's with my throat. And as the energy rises up and the impulse comes out my hands and fist, right? Like that's kind of this big wave that would take over. How do you, when you start to track, when you can be mindful enough that you're tracking the beginning signs, do you breathe, and you walk away? You give yourself a timeout, technically, right? You go into the bathroom, you ground, you do something to physically move the energy. Doing that enough times trains a different response. And then you also can start to recognize, like, the practice with a safer person, right?
Yeah.
Physically move the energy out, but also what do you want to say? What do you actually want to do instead of hit the person, right?
Yeah.
Love
it. Ooh, you just made me think, because I don't think people always know what to do when they go to the bathroom. I think they go and ruminate. Give us some good ground. They go in the bathroom and they like build up, litigate their court case against their partner.
Or they're right on the bathroom walls.
That was in middle school.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite grounding techniques? I want one from you. For me personally, I get ungrounded when I'm on social media, and I just go blah, 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 and all my energy's like right up here, neck up. I bet everyone's going to listen to this and love it. Like, what is a post-social media grounding technique?
So so you're saying while you're looking at stuff or when you get off?
Well, while I'm looking at stuff, I'm completely dissociated
90%
of the time.
Okay. And so then after,
when I get off, I'm almost, I can't be 3D. I'm two-dimensional. I almost can't feel my beautiful plants in my office, which I really love. I love it in here, and I don't feel 3D at all.
Okay. Well, so you just named something that's important, or a couple things, right? So first of all, plants. So there's an object that's grounding, a space that's grounding, right? So not everyone has access to, and for me, it's my garden, but it doesn't always have immediate access to those things. If you can't physically put yourself in the space and look at the texture, the color, the shape of the object, then imagine it in your mind's eye, right? So the same parts of the brain will activate when you're visualizing something as when you're actually doing it. Okay. So that's one thing. So then on a physical level, so put yourself, you can do it. You can pretend you're not in that room if you want to visualize the beautiful, leaves of your big plant behind you. So if you're standing, one thing you can do is you can press your feet into the ground and then press to the edges of your feet, which activates the sides of your legs, right? So it's like feeling your edges. You're like, I'm a separate being than all of this murky social media land, So feeling physically like that. If you're seated, you can push the edges of your elbows. Like if you can see me, let's see. You can push back towards the chair. So you're kind of activating the back of your body, right? And then let it go. And then let it go. So you want to inhale, push, let it go. You might want to shake it out a little bit. You can really, so what I like to also do, and I often have my clients do this, whether it's social media, whether it's anything, it brings your energy lower into your body. I call it either vulvic breathing or breathing out your asshole. So
I love it.
So
by the way, you have to follow Charna's Instagram because she's wicked funny. LaidOPEN Podcast. Isn't that it? LaidOPEN.
Yeah, Laid, L-A-I-D, LaidOPEN Podcast. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. She says things like breathe out your asshole.
So relaxing your pelvic floor, the perineum between your genitals and anus, right? Imagine it can soften and you're breathing down. So if you were sitting on a stool that was a mirror, you could fog the mirror with your breath, right? You breathe, let your belly soften, right? So picture that you're in a bathtub, right? Like if
this one works for me.
Yeah. So yeah, this is if your body was a bathtub and it's plugged up and you fill the water, and instead of water, your body is filling with energy and nerve and anxiety and thoughts. It's like, and it overflows. This is unplugging the tub. So you're exhaling out and down. You're putting your attention lower in your body. You know, you can feel your feet, you can feel your butt, your sits bones, your back. You'll notice that your jaw might have relaxed. It's hard when you have a relaxed pelvic floor to have a tight jaw. Usually when we're like, it's tight up here, right? Yeah. And just going through a few cycles of breathing. And imagining the flow of everything. It's going down versus coming out. You can imagine you are like that big plant behind you that has these long roots that come out, and the tendrils go down through the chair from each corner of the chair leg, down, 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 down.
Makes me happy.
Yeah, you're smiling. What are you feeling?
Relaxed. I mean, I know that's such a cliche word, but I mean, I've done enough of this somatic work that I can access it once I'm reminded. I just don't remember.
What sensations in your body tell you you're relaxed versus anxious?
My lower back slows is immediately relaxed. My breathing slows. The whole front side of my chest is like it opens rather than goes in.
Right. So looseness versus tension. The temperature in your body might change. You might feel like it's like more like kelp in the ocean. Like there's a softness or a pulsing that you can feel versus like bracing.
And it's much more pleasurable to feel like a piece of kelp in the ocean floating around than like this like nimble, dried stick on the side of a hill ready to catch fire. Sorry,
oh boy.
The metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to apologize at all. We heal through metaphors. We heal through dreams, and it's the metaphors that people use are really, really important and relevant. Yeah. And there's a softness, right? There's suddenly a softness, and that you're bringing it back to connection. When you're regulated and you're in a softer place, right? Imagine from this, like feel yourself in this space, and then picture the situation with this man where you got triggered. And do you feel as impacted by him from this body, this kelpie, slow, soft body.
Yeah, and I also don't feel as triggered by him because I love him. So it's not like somebody that so that already helped.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I was more bringing him up because of the anger. I didn't get so triggered in the fight. I actually quite enjoyed his anger because it gave me permission to be angry back. It's like, oh, I don't have to act like a good girl. I'm going to be angry back at you. This is great. But I do feel more access to the love part for him from this body. Like, oh, yeah, I love this person. But I knew that too.
So there's a little bit more access to remembering
the love,
remembering who he is ultimately.
Yeah.
Remembering who you are in relation, like you're like, I'm someone who loves him versus,
yeah. This is sweet. You just I just got a free 5-minute therapy session. So we're coming to the end of our time, but I want to ask you one more tip for our listeners.
Yeah.
They're sitting in a chair on a sidewalk. What are some things that they can remember to keep track of so that they're staying within that window, so that they're not getting overstimulated, and that little adjustments that they could make while they're sitting there on the sidewalk. Just little easy, quick ones.
So here's a quick, like what someone could do is they could sit down, they could say to themselves, I call all of my energy back to me, so that they create a semi-permeable bubble of protection around them, right? So they know that their boundary is there. They set the energy follows intention. So they're setting the intention. What is nourishing will come in. What's not mine will gently pass through if I accidentally take on people's stuff. So I can be a grounded resource. I don't have to worry that I'm going to take on too much stuff while I'm sitting here. Yeah. So allow things to just kind of flow in and out. Do what I was just recommending a second ago. Imagine that there's tethers, there's rooting from each chair leg through the sidewalk all the way down into the earth. So you're supported by the earth and you're kind of claiming this little chair. This is my space, grounded here. Breathing low in your belly. If you start to feel overwhelmed or, pulled into what someone else is talking about, because sometimes it's really hard. You can deeply feel things. It's okay to be moved, but to also like have your own back, have your own seat. Remember your pelvic floor as a resource to let things, as a client once called it, her poop chute, like her tailbone, it's like, let the stuff just drain out the poop chute.
I adore you.
And then in terms of listening, right? It can be helpful to not only be in your center, but in the center of your head, right? When we're here, we're in judging and we're in fear and we're in future. And when we can move towards just notice right now, if you can gently, like as if you're on a moving sidewalk, move towards the center of your head. Like you're standing on top of a mountain versus at the base of it, looking up. So you can just hold vastness. You're holding perspective, and the space that you're in is actually communicated to the person you're talking to without them even knowing, right? So one person might want to be in their heart and just feel like universal love flowing through them. But just remembering whatever your state is, you're actually, your nervous system is communicating that to the person you're listening to. So if you need to take a time out and check and take care of yourself, do that. Don't override, oh, I have to be there for them. Right? Because just like, yeah, that's all. I'll stop there. I've said a lot.
It's perfect. This is perfect. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you.
I want to do a couple plugs before we move into our last question, which is our ritual, because I want to end with our ritual. So how can people find you? They'll be in the show notes when it goes up on the podcast, and it was also in the description of this, but I wanted people to hear it too. So how can they find you, and how can what can they come work with you one-on-one?
Yes.
You do offer online trainings. I want to hear it all. What's the scoop?
Okay. So passionatelife.org is my psychotherapy practice website, Passionate Life. And Charna, CHARNA, Cassell, CASSELL.com is my podcast, blog, website. And I have a course, so you can see me individually. I work with people in person and online. And then I also have a course that's going to be released, Pathways to Peace. And it's a month worth of daily practices. And so it'll be online for you to work each day, but also a weekly call. So there'll be community as well. And hopefully it'll be an ongoing community that will then lead to in-person retreats. So yeah, and you can join my newsletter through my website. And so you can keep updated with like what's being released currently, and this LaidOPEN podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
Woohoo! You have to follow her on Instagram. You're a hoot. So we have this fun ritual, which is you and I are going to complete, and I'm going to hand the mic off to speak to many, many people who've chosen to sit on sidewalks all over the world and listen. And whatever is alive in you, words of wisdom or a wish to to listeners that have listened.
Words of wisdom.
I think, whichever.
Yeah, I wish that people, I think shame grips people so much, like not doing it, not being enough, not doing it well enough, not doing it right. And even being there for them, even when they're giving of themselves and being generous. And so I just think like being gentle with ourselves, remembering. I like saying, I remember who I am. I remember who you are. So remembering that and remembering that you're enough.
So many little gems here. Thank you so much for being here, Charna.
I love you.
I love you too. I'm so lucky.
And I just want to acknowledge, like, I so appreciate you as a colleague and also as a mom. And I got to spend some sweet time, with Traci's sons. And I gave one of her sons a plant from my garden, like a cutting. And I was thinking about that today as I was doing all my sessions outside. It's beautiful here. And the brugmansia is blooming. And I just,
your brugmansia are now in pots.
I love it.
Fully leafed. And yeah, my son baked bread at Charna's house too. It's really cute. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, you hang on because I want to talk to you about some stuff.